We are going to block out the hazardous return path now from the town hall back down to the mill building. This would be after the player finds the key in the town hall building to open up the path across the dam bridge. So I'm just reconnecting the space that we left here between this house at the base of the hill and the mountains to the right of it. And I'm just sort of creating a path that comes out roughly out the back of the town hall and across this upper ground plane here. And there's not too much image composition for me to deal with here. The plan here is to generally make this kind of a curved path that comes back down. It's pretty short right now. We're not going to get too much into detail. I'm messing around here with ways to maybe occlude the path from the player, but it's pretty small. This is the kind of thing where we're just going to sort of play around with game mechanics here with the jumping mechanic, because we know the player character can jump about 4 meters forward. We're going to make this old, decrepit, hazardous path from the top of the hill sort of fallen into disrepair. It's built out of maybe a lot of scaffolding, maybe wood scaffolding that's rotted away. It's kind of embedded into the sides of the rocks in this old kind of small gorge here. So I'm going to make this, again, make it look like it's kind of constructed, not part of the natural architecture, but actually built by the people who dwelled in the town. So I'm messing around here a little bit with maybe some lower platforms to reach. It's still really pretty high. I'm going to need to do a little bit more shrinking of this path in general. Start having the player go down a little bit earlier on. It also kind of makes more sense if the player hops out the back of the church windows to sort of very quickly descend. We don't want to have a lot of interstitial areas. We just kind of want to get right to the hazardous path right now. So I'm shortening this up a little bit. I'm making a piece of shape geometry here be like a 4 by 4 meter cube, and I'm going to make this like a way to measure my jump. Right now, the width of the path feels okay, but the gap that we need to jump across needs to be about 4 meters wide. So I have this one here. I'm going to use here again to indicate designer intention, mainly just in the editor. I'm going to make a material instance here of one of our local style materials. Actually, I just duplicated the grid texture, and I'm going to rename it Jump X. I'm going to give it a color which is just sort of indicative of gameplay. It's not really naturalistic. I'm going to give it a kind of a bright magenta color. That should work fine. So I'll add this and go back to, let's see, back to our viewport. And just apply that texture to this to show that this is a gap, not walkable space, but we know that it's measured appropriately for the character to jump across. There's still collision on this shape. We'll have to do a little bit more in terms of adjusting the collision profile for this instance of static mesh. But that's definitely the right width. I'm trying to make it so it's a good distance to jump, a good place to jump from. So I'll go to collision presets, set it to no collision, and I'll set it to actor hidden in game. So when I hit G there, it disappears. By default, you can hit G and anything you want to that's not showing up in game will be hidden. So it's a good way for you to make sort of in-editor tools like I did with the pink mesh, just to indicate like that's where the player could fall to their death, for instance, once they pass through that mesh. Right here, it's kind of too simple. Like the path sort of reaches this like lower plateau a little bit too early. So I think I'll make this jump like a little more difficult. And I'll just make it so the player, when they reach this lower staircase, they have to jump down, and I'll indicate it with another pink mesh. Again, with no collision, hidden in game. That this is the next gap they have to jump across. And I'll say that maybe there was a staircase down here that they had to land on. Might be a little bit weird, but again, because we already figured out all of our metrics and we have our dev materials here, this enables us to more easily like plan the scale of this little jumping puzzle, this little kind of hazard area. So it seems pretty good. I'm going to work a little bit more now on the natural kind of rock walls of this tiny gorge here, with the idea being like I could probably add a little more detail here if I wanted to and make it look like these platforms, these staircases, they were sort of like hammered into the sides of the natural rock walls. I think that's kind of a decent explanation. Again, just sort of trying to convey the the bounds of the playable space here, really. So I'm just sort of building. This is also, it not only bounds the edges of the hazardous challenge area, but it also is going to sort of form the bounds of the playable exterior space behind the old town hall building. Like we kind of have to like bridge the two areas. Again, this is much like it. We had rocks around the bases of the worker houses. This is sort of the foothills of the mountains and the edges of the valley that this whole settlement was built into. So I'm connecting the natural rock formations here that were around the front of the town hall's hill to, to the rocks that form kind of the boundary at the rear of the town as well. And there might be a way here for me to use the rocks if I'm careful and don't get too ambitious with it. I can probably use the rocks to sort of obscure the player's view a little bit. There's some other things we could do here if we wanted. Like right now, I'm making this kind of a bottomless pit. I haven't really figured out what I want this to be down here, other than it's a fall height that will kill the player. So I could add, if we had a color to indicate death, it could be like red to indicate death, but we can't because we're using red to indicate like locked doors. So I won't really get into that now. I could even make it water here. You could have this could be the kind of game where a fall into water is a game over situation. That could also work just fine. But for now, I haven't really figured it out, so I'm going to leave it just blank like this. I'm putting some rocks now to show like that the house is built on the very edge of a precipice, really. That house at the base of the hazardous pit. So I'm going to move here, move the player start to a position where I can kind of test the whole thing. And I'm also going to indicate like a door just for future reference. So when I build this whole building in more detail with proxy meshes, I'll know that the exit door is back where I've indicated here. It can also be useful to other people who might view your work. They might have to view your work when you're not even around, and it can always help that other people can quickly understand your intentions. So that seems okay. I'm going to play from the exit of the town hall and see how everything aligns here. It's not a bad distance. This is kind of okay. The reveal around the corner is nice. The jumps seem to work. I can just make my way over them, so it's a bit of a skill challenge. I think that the reveal could have been a little better there, but it seems like it's okay for now. Like I think you see that first gap a little too quickly. But for now, we have a pretty good hazardous path and return to the mill.